Italy and Australia, folks, this weekend. It is a game from Florence rather than Rome. It's two teams that don't meet that often. We're going to go through the lineups, some recent history, the stats, predictions, and you guys can let us know your thoughts on how this one is going to go. As with all the games this weekend and last week's games, if you want to watch them and you're in the States, check out Flow Rugby. That is certainly the place to be. Link down in the description. Heaps of rugby on there. You can even watch the top 14 if you want to watch it alongside all these internationals. 12th place Italy taking on 7th place Australia. Doesn't seem like that much difference in terms of the world rankings. The world rankings usually a bit harsh on the Italians, with them tending not to pick up that many wins in the Six Nations. And despite their 7th ranking, the Wallabies pushed a really, really good French team to the last few minutes and only lost it by a point last week away from home. The French are like 11 wins on the trot now. So, it's going to be a fascinating one. Italians obviously bouncing back from their loss in July to Georgia with a big win over the Samoans. So, yeah, man, there's lots to like about this game. Recent history between the sides, and I think the total history between the sides is all with the Australians. I don't think the Italians have ever managed to beat the Aussies. Over the last 5 games, it's obviously 5-0, and you look at an average score of 34-16 to Australia. One of those games in the last 5 I actually went to. 2011 World Cup, a wee while ago, 32-6 at North Harbour Stadium. Went with my Aussie mate. It was a pretty quiet first half, but then the Aussies kind of let loose in the second, back in the old Robbie Deans days. But what about this upcoming game? The Italians have made a handful of changes, but kept the squad largely same to the one that played last week. Lucchesi gets a start at hooker alongside Fischetti and Ferrari in the front row. Lucchesi is a guy who likes scoring tries. He's one of them try-scoring hookers, as a lot of the hookers are these days, but certainly likes a wee attack from close range. Cannone, that's Niccolo, gets a start in the second row after being on the bench last week. Ruzza swaps the 4 jersey for the 5 jersey. Negri is back in the 23, and he's a solid human. So, he's going to take some moving. Lamaro and Cannone, that's Lorenzo, are the other 2 back rowers, so same from last week. It's pleasing to see. There's certainly kind of a core of the squad which is, getting some regular game time. So, and not that old, kind of young. So very, very pleasing. I mean, Lorenzo Cannone was on his first cap last week, managed to score a try, so congrats to him. Varney and Garbisi, speaking of kind of consistency, they continue on 9 and 10. They both absolutely bossed the show last week for Italy against Samoa. Varney was kicking 50-22s. Garbisi was setting up tries. It was just beautiful from both of them. It's kind of unusual. You're used to seeing Italy on the wrong end of those kind of performances, but they were just absolutely having fun. Morisi and Brex, the same midfield and the same wingers with Bruno and Ioane. Aussie fans should know about Ioane, with him having an Aussie kind of origin and him being back for the Melbourne Rebels this coming Super Rugby season. Like, if you want his stats from last week, 2 tries. I mean, both the wingers got 2 tries, but 4 clean breaks, 7 defenders beaten, 94 metres from Monty Ioane. If you give him even half a chance, he's going to make you look absolutely stupid. And then Ange Capuozzo is back in the 15 jersey. It was Tommaso Allen last week, who's more of a 10, who was kind of doing the double playmakers thing. But Capuozzo, if you haven't seen him play, he is definitely very fleet-footed, attacking fullback, like a proper kind of traditional fullback. And certainly known to make guys look pretty silly as well with his footwork. So, it's a relatively stable side with a few guys, kind of familiar faces in the likes of Capuozzo and Negri coming back in. Nicotera, Nima, and Ciccarelli are the front row replacements. So Nicotera started last week. He's on the bench this week as the reserve hooker. Cici Halafihi, the other 2 forwards, and then Alessandro Garbisi as the replacement scrum half. He wasn't in the squad last week, so he's back in. Tommaso Allen drops to the bench, and Menoncello is the reserve kind of utility back. For the Australians, much more in the way of changes. It's one of those ones where they've still got some big names playing, but some guys who either needed minutes or are getting their first cap for Australia. So Gibbon and Fainga'a, both on the bench last week, they get starts in the front row. And Alan Alalatoa missed last week's game through, I think, concussion. He's back. He's one of their premier tight heads. Him and Tupou tend to be the 2 guys. And it is those 2 guys this weekend. Alalatoa, congratulations to him. He's captain. First time he's captain the Wallabies as far as I'm aware. Obviously captains the Brumbies in Super Rugby. But pleasing to see him back. And congrats on him for getting the captaincy. Frost and Skelton are the locks. Frost continues on. Skelton, if you're thinking of big humans, don't get much bigger than him. So good chance for him to impress because, the Aussies have used a lot of locks in the last few years, and like Skelton, he's a big man and hasn't quite done the business the last few times we've seen him in Wallabies goal, but he's got to start. So like, let's just see him do some rampaging stuff, like get some more power going forward. Hannigan, McCright, and Samu's an all-new back row. Samu's the only one who was in the 23 last week. He's up from the bench. McCright obviously kind of steps down a little notch in the pecking order when Hooper is playing, but Hooper being arrested this week means McCright, who was good in the Rugby Championship, full of tackles and some running as well, gets a start. And then Hannigan, that kind of lock, loose forward utility, who has never been my favourite player, but supposedly for Australia, he was impressive against Japan. So I look forward to seeing Big Ned have a good run. Jake Gordon gets a start. He was on the bench last week at 9. Noah Lolosio, who Dave Rennie seems to want to pick anybody else ahead of him. Right? He'll take Quade Cooper back from Japan. He'll take Bernard Foley back, even though he's kind of getting on. But yeah, Noah Lolosio, the youngster who starts regularly for the Brumbies and has played whenever there's been no one else available, gets a crack against the Italians. I like Noah Lolosio. I kind of wish Dave would just make him the guy, but Dave certainly knows what he's doing a bit more than me. But anyway, good chance for Noah to pull the strings. Paisami and Ikitau is the midfield. Remember, Foketi got injured last week, so Paisami's up starting. Nawani Tawase on the right wing is a debutant, so good for him. He's another one who toured Japan with Australia A. Good luck marking Monty Ioane, because Mark Nawani Tawase is not really known for his defence, but he's up against a very classy guy, Monty Ioane, so that's going to be one to watch. Tom Wright, speaking of guys who maybe aren't that sharp on defence, like he was phenomenal last week, ball in hand. Absolutely gassed Pinot, but Pinot got the revenge by breaking a tackle on him for that game-winning try. I think Tom Wright was 1 from 3 with his tackles last week, so bit of risk-reward. And then Jock Campbell was genuinely impressive at fullback. He continues on. Some other guys on the bench. Lockie Lonergan gets his first game for a wee while as a reserve hooker. Tom Robertson, Tony Tupo drops on the bench. Darcy Swain's back from his suspension. Lonnie Gleeson, Tate McDermott back into the 23. Ben Donaldson, potentially debut for him as the kind of reserve 10. And then Jordi Pataya back from injury, covering pretty much the back line in the midfield. So, yeah, those are the lineups. In terms of some stats, Australia, man, discipline. They got the most penalties conceded on average of all the Tier 1 teams this year, with average of 13 penalties conceded a game. However, they got some pretty good goal kicking, despite the fact that I think they've used Noah Lolosio, Quade Cooper, Bernard Foley, James O'Connor, and Reece Hodge for their goal kicking. Like, they've used a multitude of guys. The overall goal kicking percentage this year is like 89%, which is the best of all the Tier 1 teams. A lot of teams are in like the 70s. So goal kicking's been good. The Italians on the flip side have had, like, I think the youngest squad of all the Tier 1 teams this year. Average age is only like 25. But I guess sometimes with that maybe a bit of inexperience comes some what the All Blacks would call learnings or lessons. In terms of, like, the Italians have the most clean breaks against them of all the Tier 1 teams by a wee way. Like, it's almost like 7 a game. So when their defence is broken, it's often genuinely, like, catastrophically broken. So, I mean, the Aussies are the second worst of the Tier 1 teams, to be fair, with, like, 5. So it could be a pretty open game if both sides are just getting clean breaks for fun. So we will see how that plays out. But, you can see what Kieran Crowley is building, with the likes of Garbisi and Varney and Lamaro and whatnot, all these guys who are Capuozzo, still in their kind of early to mid-20s. Recent history, like I mentioned, it's all the Aussies, but we're looking at 2018 as the most recent game, 26-7, so kind of not that recent in the scheme of things. That's, prior to the last World Cup, so a lot has changed since then. Dave Rennie and Kieran Crowley certainly weren't in their jobs back then, but the predictions for this one, the bookies are saying the Aussies by 16, and the Rugby Forecast algorithm saying the Aussies by 19. So it is from Florence rather than Rome. We've got a Kiwi ref from Brendan Pickerel. It's a 2 o'clock local kickoff, which makes it, I think, 2 in the morning over here in NZ. So probably one for me to watch delayed. But for you guys in Australia, maybe if it's like midnight or something, you can probably stay up and watch it, then go to bed after, or go to bed early and just watch a whole morning of rugby. For you guys on the West Coast, I think it's probably a pretty decent time right before bed. But anyway, you guys let us know your thoughts. Can you see the Italians getting a win over the Wallabies, a much changed Wallaby side, or do you think the Wallabies are going to be too good? You guys let us know your thoughts, and yeah, talk to you guys again soon. See you later.